Hello and welcome along to the RTE Rugby podcast. It is Rugby World Cup quarter-final week. Ireland taking on France this Sunday at Sandy Park in Exeter after last week's 40-0 defeat to New Zealand at the weekend to finish out Pool C. Bernard Jackman is back with us on the podcast this week. Your first visit to the new studio, Bernard. We haven't seen you in a while. Did you have a good summer?
I did, yeah. It's a lot more comfortable than the front seat of my car or my office. So I've no free coffee, but
I used to enjoy the weekly travels of Bernard Jackman. See where he was on a
given
given Wednesday.
I'm much happier to have a couch to sit down and chat rugby on.
Yeah, I think people were getting a bit sick of looking at the back of my wardrobe as well. But we've upgraded now and just in time for the World Cup. We'll cover a lot today. We will obviously be the main part of this podcast. We'll be talking about the Rugby World Cup, looking back on Ireland's defeat to New Zealand, looking ahead to the quarter-final against France. But towards the end as well, we will just touch on the Irish provinces because there's a few little bits in the news this week. We had the chance to go down and speak to Clayton McMillan, the new Munster head coach, as well yesterday. So we'll touch on a few of those. But first up, we're looking back on that defeat to New Zealand and our old friend, the Rugby World Cup quarter-final this weekend. Irish rugby still waiting for a first quarter-final win in a World Cup. Obviously, the women's team have been to a semi-final before, back in 2014, but that was through topping a pool stage. There were no quarter-finals to win that year. 3 days on from that 40-0 defeat, does it sit any different with, when you look back at things? Because I do find sometimes when you watch a game in the moment, you might have a little bit of a different feel to it. And then when you sit down in the cold light of day and re-watch it and reanalyze it, some things look a little bit different. How are you feeling 3 days on?
Yeah, I rewatched it. I think I was pretty critical post-game. Not of the players or the effort, just how they were set up to play. And I suppose reflecting on that, was I overly harsh? So I watched it back on Monday night, and yeah, my good instinct at the time, I'd still stand over. I felt there was a gulf in class in the two teams, and I felt Ireland put in a huge effort, but just didn't have the tools, the skill set, or the plan to be able to go and really kind of put New Zealand on the back foot. It started perfectly, we had the kick off, we kicked long, really good chase, we pressurised the exit, so we got a foothold in their 22 quite early in the game, which is what you want if you're the underdogs. You want to put them, take them out of their flow. We had a chance to take 3 points, we didn't take it. We kicked to the corner, we go for a front peel. It's badly executed. We end up in touch. A couple of minutes later, we end up getting a scrum, and we're under the post, a couple of yards out, and we fluff our detail there. We knock it on, and then when they exit, we give away a penalty on for an escort, right? And after that, it's pretty much game over. So we never really found a way back in. Of course, we had opportunities to score, but it was when the game was over, and the scoreline of 40-0. It's probably harsh. It is harsh, whatever. But the reality is, you got to be better in those areas if you have realistic chances of being semi-finalists. Or they were talking about, Scott Bean was talking about being there till the final, and of course we can. But I think that game could potentially be a real shock to our self-belief, or the alternative is it gives us a chance to modify our game to be in a position to go and have a scalp against France. And I don't believe that France, for me, the two teams that are clearly the best are New Zealand and England, with Canada just behind, and France on recent form are a little bit behind that again. The fear with France is some of the individuals they have, the way they play is very similar to how New Zealand ripped us apart. And that's going to be the challenge, is not giving them those transitional possession opportunities that New Zealand hurt us with, that you would imagine France can hurt us with as well.
We'll get into the nitty-gritty of the attack and defence stuff in a few minutes, but before we do that, I might just kind of focus on even trying to keep an even keel over the course of this week and not emotionally overreacting to what happened at the weekend, because that's really important. As I was saying, your opinion might change shortly after a match. That kind of happened to me on Sunday evening. Straight after the game, I walked out going, God, I'm not really feeling good about next week. But to be honest, speaking to players around the mix zone afterwards, and not even Scott Beeman, but I remember Sam Mona in particular just really, really kept an even keel and was very cold and analytical about what had happened out on the pitch. And I'm sure they were all very, very disappointed to lose a game 40-0 to New Zealand, but they didn't look absolutely shell-shocked or devastated what had happened. It looked as if even the 20 minutes, half an hour after that game had been over, they had kind of wiped the slate clean and were pretty much ready to go again. They weren't dwelling on it. They weren't feeling sorry for themselves. It was very much here are the things we did bad today. Here are the things we need to improve on next week. And that probably did give me a little bit more confidence. But as I say, there's stuff we'll be getting into in a little while that it's not really stuff you can fix over the course of a week.
Yeah, no, look, I think it's great that the players can park it because the reality is there was no massive jeopardy. It was a free shot. We were wounded, but we didn't die. We have another chance. So you can't dwell on it too long, but you also have to analyse it and wonder why, which in an unbelievable opportunity to show what we can do, in front of effectively a home crowd, to be honest, an amazing setting to put in a type of performance that you could be really proud of. I think that opportunity was missed, and I would worry. I mean, Scott Beeman afterwards, he was quoted as saying that the New Zealand defence coach was praising Ireland for what a difficult match they gave. So, I think that's worrying for me. Is he just saying that to try and frame it, or does he actually believe that we really challenged New Zealand? If he believes we really challenged New Zealand and they were, in difficulty trying to stop us, then I think I would have less confidence that we would win this week. Because realistically, we need to find solutions. So if you're France and you're looking at that game, you'll say, look, Ireland is so reliant on Dana O'Brien's long kicking game, right? So if we can get pressure to her, based on last week, she can get spooked. She doesn't have the shape around her to play out of that pressure, right? So, and this isn't a criticism of her, it's how we're setting up. So I'm very disappointed in looking at that team on Saturday or Sunday, and I know we don't have a box kick in 9, we don't have many other options, but if you're going to kick exclusively off 10, you need to make sure that the ruck positions you're putting in her to kick off
are well protected.
Are well protected, and that she has protection. So the worst thing that can happen is that she gets spooked and she has no options to bail out and to create another ruck. And we saw that happen a couple of times. And again, France will go after that. So now, I think there's been a massive positivity in terms of the culture and the enjoyment people get and the balance between work and play and all that stuff. And that's really important. But now when you get to a knockout stage of Rugby World Cup, you have to also add a tactical level of detail and smarts that I didn't see last weekend. And look, I also understand that this team, I think we could see it against Spain and Japan, but we won, right? And we pulled away at the end. And I think we won those games mainly down to we had better individuals than they did, rather than we were unbelievably well coached. And likewise, when you saw Sunday, like the players that we expect to be kind of bringing Ireland forward, Eve Higgins and Bevan Parsons and Amy Lee Costigan, etc. We didn't have a plan to get them onto the ball in the right areas. We used Bevan into the seam quite early in our own half, and she got us go forward. But after that, I just saw us playing very lateral, very deep, and just getting eaten up. And I think afterwards, the impression I had was, New Zealand way more athletic than us, way more powerful, because there were so many collisions that they just knocked us back, on our backs. But then when I re-looked at it, I actually thought that it was our poor shape, it was our poor animation around the ball carrier, which allowed them just go and get those double hits. So again, they're things that coaches need to do better, and that's the attacking side of the game, the kicking side of the game. The other thing is defensively. I did a clip. The problem we have is that we have to kick long because we don't have any contestable kickers or kicking game. And then our kick chase defence is quite poor. So you're literally, it's okay against Japan and Spain because they're not good enough to hurt you. Whereas we saw at the weekend, New Zealand, when they got the ball in that counter-attack type possession or transition, they had the athletes to do it. And also, as I said, France will as well. So defensively, we made a change to our coaching staff. Hugh Hogan left the team, and since then I've actually seen our defence regress. And it's difficult for James Skaysbrook, who's come in late. But realistically, should we believe we have a chance? Like before the game on Saturday, people were saying, we've beaten New Zealand the last 2 times, etc., etc. There was reasons why, based on historical results, why we should believe we can win. I think a lot of people got carried away with that. But when you actually look at the nuts and bolts of our game versus theirs, I think we have a very rocky foundation to go and expect to believe we can beat New Zealand or we can beat France. And that's now the pressure's on the coaching staff to get some foundations in place this week, because the players will give everything they have. They did against New Zealand, but if they're set up badly or set up poorly, the better team will always, the better individuals will always win.
Let's stick on the defence, and we'll go back to attack in a little while. But 6 New Zealand tries, and the worrying part was only one of those really came from like territory sustained pressure. You had that; it was the second try of the game where a couple of penalties gave New Zealand a line out in the 22, big carry up the middle, and then they get it to a couple of forwards and they get over the line. The rest of them were coming either from deep and cutting Ireland apart and moving them wide and spreading them around and getting the ball to width, or it was a set piece inside the 22, a couple of phases, and they just stretch Ireland again. As I say, two were early phases of set piece, pulled Ireland open. 3 were just Ireland's defence being completely manipulated by the numbers and space. And the first score then was just poor numbering up and communication, where there was far too big of a gap between Linda Dugang and Aoife Dalton. Then they get over the gain line and they move the ball wide. As you mentioned, it comes back to the changing of a defence coach just a few months out from the World Cup. So Hugh Hogan departed the Irish coaching group. James Skaysbrook came in. It probably wasn't discussed a lot in the build-up how big of an impact it was. And I think part of that was, in fairness to Scott Beamond, with the job he's done so far since he arrived, there is enough credit in the bank that I think people were fairly kind of saying, okay, look, if this is what he wants to do, he's done it in the past, he's got a good record so far, let's give him a bit of a wide berth here and see how it goes. But this wasn't just Ireland being ripped apart by the world champions at the weekend. The warning signs, as you said, were there against Spain and Japan as well in the opening 2 games, where they were scoring tries quite easily and really not having to put Ireland under an enormous amount of pressure to do it. And I know France haven't been outstanding in the World Cup, but they looked a lot more comfortable at the weekend, and now that they've got Pauline Bourdon-Sansu back in the squad as well, that attack is going to be a lot more capable of stretching Ireland in a similar way to New Zealand did.
Yeah, Neil, 100%. And I think we have to be very careful not to underestimate France. When I've spoken to people involved in the French women's game, and when I've looked at them over the last year, I've seen a lot of experimentation and trying to build more depth. Why were they doing that? For the World Cup. And while they haven't, they weren't amazing in round 1 or round 2, they didn't have to be. They were always going. The quality was always meant they're going to qualify for quarter final. They were always going to qualify as top seed from their group, as far unless they really messed up. And they now, last weekend against South Africa, showed that they're starting to just find their form. So that's you compare that to Ireland. Ireland have had a really good prep, I think, for this World Cup, and decisions around coaching staff and stability. Like Alex Codling is a really interesting one, because the RFU and Alex Codling insisted that he would stay for the World Cup, because that's what you want. You want your coaches on board for as long as possible leading into that. So the message is consistent and clear. And that's why the Hugh Hogan one is him departing is so strange and bizarre and unusual, because
he was massively popular with the players.
He still is.
Himself and Alex Codling, just from covering Ireland. Well, with Codling it's for more than a year, but with Hogan as well, it's over the last few months in the Six Nations. I really noticed that they were 2 coaches that regularly enough over the course of that campaign, players would go out of their way to mention the work that they've been doing and how popular they are. It wasn't a case of you've been asked a question about how good is Alex Codling, what work has Alex Codling been doing with you, and you talk about it. It was, they could be halfway through a different answer, and all of a sudden they will be talking about the work that Hugh Hogan's doing with them on defence and how important it's been and how great he has been. That's the part that jumps out, how popular he clearly was in the squad.
Yeah, and that's what you're hearing on the record. Imagine what we're hearing off the record around how good he was. Like, they believed in him. So again, you're going to a World Cup, and it's, the fitness and the skill set and the tactics are all important, but it's also important that the players believe in the coach that's responsible for a big area of the game, particularly an area of the game like defence, because for Ireland, because we aren't as developed in all other aspects of a game as likes of England or New Zealand. So we have to be able to defend. And as I said, you mentioned France, or Japan and Spain. it being an area of concern. I also thought in the warm-up games, there was a lot of soft tries being conceded. And again, I'm not trying to bash Scott Beeman here, but I'm just saying it as from what we hear and then what we see. So pre-match, he spoke about this New Zealand threat, and he said, "Oh, we're going to bring the line speed that will challenge their skill set," right? And it's such a generic thing to say about your defence. Like, the worst thing I think you can bring to a defence who aren't sure of their actual system is line speed. Because line speed,
then you get dog legs, and you get
line
holds
speed exposes everything. Because I'm not an anti-line speed like Jack Nienaber, Sean Edwards. I love them, right? They can work, but we've seen how long it can take to build that. And if you think about what we were hearing, or not sure what we were hearing, because I know coaches don't all tell the truth in what they say. But
no,
what we
they
were
don't do that.
what we were seeing, Neil, like, did you see against Spain or Japan or in our friendlies a team that were geared for massive line speed?
No,
right? So honestly, it's the worst thing you can say. You can do it against a bad team and get away with it, but to try and do that against New Zealand, that's where you saw the narrowness in our defence. That's where you saw the offloads being given. That's where you saw New Zealand being able to expose us quite quickly. And even that set piece try off a maul, like, you look at our defence there, it's all over the place. Like, and that's something that you can rep. Like, that's not off a turnover after 10 phases where you're out of shape. That was literally off a maul, a line out maul. And
one little decoy runner, and everything goes after it.
It was bizarre.
Yeah.
It was bizarre. But I feel sorry for the players, because you could sense they all wanted to make something happen. But, and again, maybe they were unlucky that they were playing New Zealand, but I think France have the skill set to expose that as well. It's just a generic thing that people say. And yeah, of course, line speed can challenge skill sets, but I think realistically, if you're going to be a real line speed type defence, you have to go through the pain in maybe a Six Nations, in some warm up games. Maybe you need to even have it aligned that your provincial sides are aligned to it, so that everybody is comfortable with it. So that frightened me a little bit. Like, I would say, and maybe this week we'll be better at it, or maybe we can shut down France, and it's right. But these are the things that are in my mind that are causing me concern around what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. And I think, if it goes badly on Sunday against France, defensively, the decision for Hugh to leave probably was the pivotal one, really, because, as I said, there's so much good happening, and there's so much effort and desire. I just think that we need to make sure that they have the tools to get the best of themselves as well.
Staying on line speed, we probably saw from New Zealand, we saw line speed when it is working, and the amount of pressure they were putting not just Dan O'Brien under, but a lot of the Irish players as well, to the point that it was affecting passes. It was affecting the ball receivers, where I think a lot of them, as the game wore on, were probably anticipating the line speed, and they were nearly standing a little bit further back and taking the ball in static positions, and it just had a knock-on effect throughout the game. They went after Dan O'Brien all day. They had their homework done around where the tip-on passes were going, who were the players coming around corners. And as I said, the quality passing didn't help as well. On a couple of occasions, Dan O'Brien was reaching for balls over her head, and that's never going to work for an out half, and it just invites a defence on. And then the players just standing still, trying to take on the ball. Hannah O'Connor, who's been in with us the last few weeks, hasn't been able to join us today, busy with her actual day job. She did send a message in, though, around Ireland's attack and how they can get around things. So she says, how can we adapt our attack to what's in front of us on the fly, i.e. a rush defence, and stop trying to force wide and attack inside or attack interior defence, and then on from that, creating opportunities in phase play rather than relying solely on the set piece, which is probably where we do see Ireland scoring a lot of their tries when they manage to execute them, like we tried to do last week but didn't. Like, for example, that early chance where they went down the blind side off the line out, and Ruth Campbell gets knocked into touch. So many of the Irish tries do come from trick plays or just well executed set pieces, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you do see Ireland struggle at times against the better teams when they get into their attacking shape. Yeah,
100%. And I think part of the problem with that is we don't have any balance to our kicking game. So you tend to overplay once you get into a certain area of the field. We saw one little chip kick from Dana, which had Black Ferns in trouble, but that was quite late in the game. the biggest New Zealand are a line speed team, right? So it wasn't like they obviously were able to really focus on Dana because we don't have a kicking option outsider or insider, and that maybe exasperated, and that's why we went, oh, geez, that they're really getting off the line. But the reason they were really getting off the line when we weren't trying to kick was because we insisted on playing through 10. Okay, a lot, right? And the same shape off 10 without real animation or connection. So New Zealand weren't spooked about our ability to be able to throw two passes and get around them. So they were really comfortable coming up and in. And then secondly, as I said, the fact that we were quite keen to play two long passes off a ruck around the 15 metre meant the ball was in the air for so long that it was just meat and drink to them. So what do other teams do when they play teams with a very well organised and aggressive and powerful defence? They tend to play zigzag patterns a little bit to soften them up. The ball stays in the air for less time, so they attack often the second and third defender rather than what we're trying to do is attack the fifth and sixth defender. Okay, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
Not having visuals, but they bounce back blind a lot. They
essentially just trying to keep the defence honest.
Totally, yeah. So you let them waste their energy by getting geared up to, because line speed comes really from third defender out. Okay, and as I said, the longer the ball is in the air, the further up the field they get, the harder it is to get around them or potentially go through them. And so every positive collision that they win then is over the gain line for them, and you're on the back foot. So that's one of the things I was critical about. I think we've shown a decent level of detail around our set piece our attack and our launch, but if we don't score quickly, we go into our generic shape, right? And there was no modification of that against New Zealand. Now, maybe the coaches are way ahead of us, and they were basically holding that back for France, for a quarterfinal opponent. And if that's the case, brilliant. But I think that when you're not guerrilla warfare, you need to just be able to adapt your game, hit and run, okay, at certain times, and until you get a little bit of momentum and they start to doubt themselves, and then maybe you go back into your normal shape, which is your go-to. So so I always think you should set your team up 80%, 20%, so 80% what you say and work on all the time, but 20% is important, and you might start with the 20%, if that makes sense, to take them out of their sync. And as I said, I think we were 100%. This is how Ireland play, and you're not going to be able to stop us. And I thought that was naive, and it didn't work. It didn't work in the end.
Fitness and players available will obviously have a big say as well on this week. There's training and a press conference later on today as well, so we'll have the latest on rte.ie/sport. Michael Glennon is over in Exeter for us this week. Stacey Flood obviously picked up that nasty cut on her foot that, we obviously don't know yet the extent of that. She could play this weekend. She might not be able to play. Eve Higgins went off for a late HIA. By all accounts, she came through that, so fingers crossed she'll be okay. Adele McMahon, I think her knee was acting up, that like a long-term knee issue she's had. Fiona Chute obviously missed out before the game. Obviously, so did Enya Breen. Elena Perry was a late scratch as well. There are a lot of players in that mix, but obviously the big one is Aoife Wafer. And you have to take some of the injury updates from the Irish squad with a grain of salt. I have to say it. But she did go through the warm-up on Sunday afternoon before the game. I pretty much followed her around the pitch for about half an hour trying to see how she was going. Seemed to be taking part in everything, seemed to be getting right into the mix of it as well. So you would hope she's on track this week. How much does your prediction for this weekend vary depending on whether or not she's available?
Yeah, look, I think with Doherty Wall being out as well, we are very reliant on Aoife's just punch. Look, obviously she can do lots more than just punch, but that was an area that probably would have disappointed the coaching staff and the players themselves. It was that even our and this is why I'm being critical of the shape and the tactics, because players who normally can get us on the front foot looked power shy, right? So we have lots of players who can carry well, but we obviously have Aoife who can carry exceptionally well and make things happen. Doherty Wall can carry exceptionally well and make things happen. So with Doherty being injured, and also I know you mentioned, and I saw the interviews, how they were able to kind of get over that defeat quite quickly. I do think it would be a massive fill-up to confidence levels to know that she was going to be coming out of that dressing room with you on Sunday, if you're an Irish player.
Big
so
time.
there's the what she can do, and then we know that's exceptional, but it's also the lift I think it will give everybody, and that's why it's crucial. And I think even if she's only 8 out of 10 fit, I think she probably has to play now. I think she has to play, and the fact that they've waited this long would lead you to believe she did warm up, as you say, on Sunday. 7 days later, unless she has a setback, I think she'll be okay to play.
Yeah, and I think it's a case as well where it's been spoken about a few times in the last few weeks. Where what if she doesn't play at the World Cup? Was it wasted bringing her along just in a wait and see capacity? And could you have used that pick on a different player as well? I think ultimately, if you were leaving out Aoife Wafer to get the injury sorted and not bringing her here and bringing someone else, realistically, it's probably not a player who was going to be playing that many minutes anyway, and it wasn't a player that was going to be integral to Ireland's campaign. And ultimately, you're making a value call on it. Is Aoife Wafer worth more to you in the squad not playing than someone else barely playing? And I think you still side with Aoife Wafer on that.
100%. No, I have no issue with bringing her. And even the fact that she was able to do some of the warm up shows she's not a million miles away. Obviously she still has to tick a few boxes to be able to play, but no, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. If there was ever a chance she was going to be fit, I think you had to bring her. That's how influential she is.
France then. What I love about France, whether it's the men's or women's game, you really don't know what you're going to get on a given day. It's just something that just kind of permeates through French rugby culture completely, regardless of whether it's the men's game or the women's game. Unimpressive in their opening 2 matches, but flexed the muscles a bit against South Africa. Granted, it was a week in South Africa, 57-10 at the weekend. And as I said, Pauline Bourdon Sansu has them looking a lot sharper. They don't have Romain Ménager, who's been one of the best back rows in the Six Nations over the last couple of years. Ireland haven't beaten them since 2017, but the last 2 meetings have been very, very competitive between them. It was 27-15 in the Six Nations earlier this year, and that was a one that Scott Beam and pretty much every Irish player on the pitch that day feels that they let that one get away. They had a lot of missed opportunities in attack, and they were very inaccurate. Some of the quotes from Scott Beam that day. The narrative with this group: we don't want to be noble losers, particularly with the World Cup on the horizon. This could very well be a World Cup quarterfinal, is what he said on that day. That has come to pass, and I suspect a lot of the Irish players have. I know they've been hoping to top a group or maybe play Italy or South Africa in a quarterfinal. I suspect a lot of them might have had a World Cup quarterfinal against France in the back of their head for the last few months. No,
100%, and running them close or closer. The last 2 games, like the Six Nations game, we could have easily won it, but I'm afraid that that's not the true France. I know French teams can be unpredictable, but at World Cups they do tend to do very well. And as I said,
could or should have beaten New Zealand in the last World Cup.
100%, and just the worst thing we could have had is for them to get a massive win like they did against South Africa. And I agree, South Africa aren't the thermometer check that they are in the men's game, but just getting that confidence, those passes starting to sit, getting that feel-good factor, and even though it's been close the last 2 times, they will believe that they have Ireland's number. So I think it'll take a monumental effort for us to win, and I'm really fascinated to see how Ireland go out and go after them, because there's no doubt this Irish team can beat them. There's no doubt, but we'll have to be much better than we've been in any of these games. I think maybe punditry wise and maybe fan wise, we overestimated the value of the Japan and Spain win. We didn't actually go through it in fine detail and see the flaws as well. And so we're going to have to fix a lot of different things to be good against France. Our scrum has been going really well, but we've our line out maul. If we do play a trick play, we just got to execute it. Like Codling is the master of that, and that's why he'll be frustrated, because they made a decision to kick to the corner and they just didn't have their detail 100% right. And obviously it's a huge blow morale wise when you go down that front channel and get knocked into touch. So all those little things will have to be better if we're going to beat France.
In terms of the belief, then that's probably that. Like, I know we've gone into detail around the tactics of attack and defence, but when you are an underdog, like, the belief has to be a big thing. And I would say the most recent 2 seasons against France, there is plenty of belief that they've closed the gap considerably. And I'd say they know within themselves they are capable of beating this team, whether it happens this year or next year or the year after, whatever. The tricky part, I suppose, and it's something we've seen with this Irish team, they can have very good prolonged spells in games, but they're most likely to concede a try right after conceding a try. And we saw it obviously against New Zealand at the weekend, where Ireland dominate the opening quarter of an hour. And as soon as New Zealand get that opening try, they're back in for another one within a couple of minutes. It was the same. It was the same in the Japan game the Spain game Japan game. Sorry, the first game of the World Cup, where Japan go on a roll early in the second half. They're pulling Ireland back, and but for that Eve Higgins intercept try, that could have been a very, very different outcome that afternoon. We saw it against Spain a week later, where all of a sudden Ireland were cruising early on in the opening half, and it was back to a level game. Against Canada in the World Cup warm-up, against England in the Six Nations, where Ireland had that brilliant first half, but once England started to get on top, they were running in the tries. It probably is. It's a growing Ireland team, and you know they're still early in their journey. This is probably the World Cup before the real World Cup for them in 4 years' time in Australia. But the next step for them is, I suppose, being able to problem solve in games and on the fly, and reacting to a try and not compounding errors with errors.
Yeah, but I think so. Effectively, when momentum goes against us, we get hurt badly, right? I totally agree with you on that. And even the England game, where we had such a positive start, and afterwards, I think, we said, fitness, the bench. But I actually think when you see it happening against Spain and Japan and Canada and New Zealand, it's not just fitness, because this team are fit.
Yeah. And this can often happen early in games. It's not. I don't think it's a fitness issue. It doesn't.
And like against Japan, we end up finishing fairly strongly, whatever. So, but what I see it as being an issue, the real defining factor is that teams who tend not to hemorrhage points like we do, or for momentum swings to be as prolonged or as dangerous as it is for us, is they have a very good kicking game and a very good defence. Okay, so effectively neither of those are locked in for us, right? So and we, can our kicking game be effective? Yeah, you can bang the ball down the field from down.
When it's good, it's brilliant.
It's brilliant. Yeah, it can be, right? But the problem is it's interlaid. So if you only have a long kicking game, but your defence isn't strong, effectively you're inviting the opposition packages. Like, so I showed some clips that I picked out from France and Japan to some coaches that I chat to, and they were like, Ireland can't kick long against New Zealand. You can only go contestable because you're going to get punished. But then I looked at the profile of the team and how we play, and we don't have that option. So we're not a team that have shown any capacity to kick contestables, right? So that's the worry for me, is that it's two weaknesses that when you join them together, it's a big problem. And it means that you can see the try, but you've got nothing that you can hang your hat on for the next 5 or 6 minutes that's going to lock you in. It's funny, it's a stupid story, but when I was in Connacht back at the start of professionalism, we had a fella called Glenn Ross, and we were losing matches by 30-40 points or whatever, right? And it was every Monday morning was a pretty sobering experience, the review. And after about 6 weeks anyway, he came in Monday morning. The previous few weeks he'd been downbeating himself. You could see that he was struggling to come up with solutions for us, whatever. But he came in one Monday morning anyway, we'd lost heavily, and he was like, I got it, lads. I know how we're going to stop this momentum swings against. He said, the problem we have is that when we concede one try, we concede 7, right? Okay. And we were like, okay, deadly. Like, what's he going to come up with? And he goes, I'm going to get a message on. I'm going to sense it up in the coaching box, and I'm going to get a message on. I'm going to send a code word on, right? And that'll make us lock in. So we were like, okay, what's the code word? What's the solution? He said, Alcatraz, right? Okay, nothing in, nothing out. When you hear Alcatraz, we don't give him the ball for 20 minutes, right? And Eric Elwood put his hand up and said, Glenn, we're not trying to give them the ball. You know what I mean? That wasn't the issue. The issue wasn't just the defence. It's actually we couldn't keep the ball, or our kicking game wasn't good enough or our set piece wasn't good enough to be able to win our own set piece. So you have to have certain things that are strong enough that you can, as I said, use to be able to stop the opposition being on the front foot.
Yeah.
And the two things that I think that we're quite shaky on at the moment are our kicking game. And I agree with you, it can be brilliant, right? But I don't think it's brilliant enough. And then our defence. And that's an issue that if France, if we give France those ins into the game, they can score like without any multi-phase. They can just score from one possession. So it's a big task.
Did Alcatraz work?
No, it didn't. No. When the whole team laugh and go out and go, that fella's bonkers. And we didn't have the things that you need, the players, the belief, the systems in place. Yeah.
I remember years and years ago, it was probably in my early 20s, and it was a team I was playing on, and we had a similar thing where there was a code word introduced, Lucasade, and that code word meant the next 10 minutes are like your hardest 10 minutes. You're going absolutely hell for leather, and lovely idea in principle at a crucial stage in a game. Okay, this is the point where we focus in on. But it was getting to the point where lads were calling Lucasade every 5 minutes around the pitch. it lost all meaning within probably a game and a half.
Come here, I'm not knocking the idea, and I've had some stupid solutions as a coach as well. But it's just it's the idea of it's perfect. Don't give them the ball; they can't score. But if you have to be able to keep the ball as well, and we weren't necessarily a team trying to give it away. You know?
Before we finish up, I will kind of talk a little bit about the provinces, because pre-season friendlies in full swing at the moment. Connacht have had a couple of good wins. Ulster host Edinburgh this weekend. Leinster playing Cardiff in Tala. Munster face Bath in Cork. I was down in Limerick yesterday. I had the opportunity of chatting to the new Munster head coach Clayton McMillan. You can read about it on RTE.ie at the moment as well. But staying on the World Cup topic, here's a little snippet. I asked McMillan about Alex Codling and being torn between wanting him to arrive into Munster as soon as possible to start his job, and obviously wanting him to get a good send-off from the Rugby World Cup.
Yeah, well, I was in a bit of a conflicted situation last week when, he was part of the Irish team, and obviously I've come from New Zealand and know a lot of those girls and coaching staff well. And I thought they gave a really good account of themselves despite the final scoreline. I'm really excited about Cotters. The players speak highly of him. Every conversation I have with him is entertaining, but highly detailed. I think we're going to get on like a house on fire. He's been contributing massively to what we have going on in terms of our line-out, even in his absence. Myself and a couple of other coaches are sort of just treading water until he gets here. So I'd love him to be here, but I also know that he's highly committed to the Irish women. He loves working with them, and we hope they go as deep as possible into competition, and we'll deal with whatever we have to deal with here.
Has it been a challenge though over these last couple of months?
No, not a challenge, just opportunity for others to get some coaching in, and it'll bring a bit of freshness and something different when he comes back into the environment.
It was interesting getting just a chance to press the flesh down there, meet Clayton McMillan, see what it's all about. He's had them doing a few interesting things in pre-season. They've been out boxing in St. Francis's in Limerick. They've been swimming in the 50-metre pool in UL. They've done hill running. He even brought them out to Rockwell College for a little camp out there. It was when their friendly against Biarritz was cancelled, but it was a real primitive. They were staying in the dorms out there in the boarding college, and real back to basic stuff. I am very interested to see how it all goes this season.
Yeah, it's interesting, and if from what we're hearing, Munster's and Connacht's pre-seasons kind of focus is completely different. Connacht very much using rugby as a way of getting fit, and the Stuart Lancasters Tuesdays and big rugby sessions, and working on your defence and attack at the same time that you're building that stamina. And then I'm not saying that Munster aren't doing a lot of rugby stuff, but they're also doing a lot of off-feet or non-traditional fitness like swimming and boxing, etc. And it's everybody set it up differently. Connacht look like they're ready to go, and they were very impressive against Sale last week. And I think that's really smart for them because with the Lions and with did summer tours and all that stuff. Connacht really have to focus a fast start. Plus for Stuart, I think Stuart, when he looks back in Racing, he didn't really get those kind of statement wins early enough to get the crowd, to get Jackie Lawrence Eddie, to get the players to believe in the new methods. And I'm not saying that Connacht wouldn't, because obviously he's a brilliant coach, but it will just help. It just helps everyone settle down. And I'm sure Clayton wants a fast start as well, but they obviously don't have as many internationals as they historically did. And will be strong at the start of the season, but everything I've heard about him, so I know some coaches who worked with him in the Chiefs. They say he's a brilliant guy, very good coach, has a real aura about him, and I think he can be the guy who can hopefully get Munster back up to where they deserve to be. Yeah,
he said he's been doing a lot of kind of, before he arrived, he was ringing around a lot of the ex-New Zealand or the Kiwis who were ex-Munster players or coaches down the years. He was talking to Rob Penny, Rua Tupoki, Jason Holland as well, obviously, and even got in touch with Joe Schmidt just to even try to get a sense of Irish rugby culture and Munster rugby culture. And it was funny. He was kind of saying a lot of those training methods for him, it was an opportunity as a new coach to get a sense of what players are like out of their comfort zone and how they're reacting to kind of tricky situations and try to get a read on players like that as well. That's Munster, and you mentioned Connacht there as well.
Just on Clayton McMillan, I don't want to be pushing another podcast, but if you want to hear insight into him,
there was a great one.
Yeah, between two beers.
Yeah,
it's about an hour and a half, but it gives you a great sense of what type of man he is, what type of character he is, what type of leader he is, and also his backstory in terms of how he's got to where he is. So
it's basically his coaching manifesto. That podcast.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's very good. So yeah, just for any Munster fans or Irish rugby fans who are interested in knowing a little bit more about him, I think he lets his guard down more potentially than he will in a post match press conference here.
Yeah, certainly. And the last point, Leinster have obviously been going about their pre-season fairly quietly. I think that kind of tends to happen when they've had so many players away with Lions and Ireland duty as well. But popped into the news yesterday, Josh Neill, an under-18 South African international, Irish qualified, has joined up with the Leinster Academy. Tell us, who's Josh Neill?
Josh Neill is one...
And sorry, answer us as well. Why are the Leinster Academy having to bring in a back row forward from South Africa? Is the Leinster School Senior Cup not producing enough back row forwards?
No, I think it is, but this is what the best teams or people who want to be the best teams do. So you look at rugby is still 30 years professional, and we still haven't really grasped that need to be as ambitious as we can be across all aspects. So who Josh Neill is he's a 17-year-old back row from Western Cape, who every franchise in South Africa wanted to tie down. Like, he's at his age group, he's a special talent. So even in South Africa, where they produce lots of back rows as well, a lot of really sharp people believe he has the capacity to go to the highest level, which is to be obviously an international, whether it's Springbok or an Irish international. His brother had already plays cricket for Ireland, or has played cricket for Ireland. So it's a little bit unusual. A lot of players in New Zealand or South Africa or Australia who are dual qualified, they often tend to wait and see if they can make the country that they've brought up in first, and if not, they'll go and explore opportunities elsewhere. So Hugh Jones, for example, in Scotland, he obviously played his rugby in the Stormers and Western Province at the start. But by all accounts, from my understanding of the conversation that happened in South Africa, it wasn't a financial thing. It was, he realised that there was an opportunity to leave South Africa early to come to Ireland and potentially have a better career, or play for Ireland. I'm not sure. I don't know the ins and outs of the motivation or whatever, but he made a decision, and it wasn't the financial aspect to it. It was literally he wanted to go and get in early. So why do Leinster have lots of back rows? Absolutely. Their senior squad are stacked, right? But every so often, a player comes along who potentially can go to the next level. or is more likely to go to the next level than what's there. So I suppose if I was the other provinces, I'd be gutted I didn't convince Josh Neill to come to me.
I think it's always a good barometer in judging a signing. How have the local media reacted to that player leaving? And I always remember when James Lowe joined Leinster, we knew a little bit about him, but I always recall seeing how angry and disappointed a lot of the New Zealand media were that they were losing a player like James Lowe, and that probably filled you with a good bit of confidence that he was going to turn out. Similar, I remember around CJ Stander coming over, there was a lot of disappointment that they'd lost someone like him as well. Yeah. I think if the home media are quite disappointed or home media or home players or coaches or whoever are quite disappointed to be losing that player, it's probably a good sign.
Yeah, he's a big, tall, rangy, athletic back row forward who, in his age grade, is exceptional. He has to coach, train on, and that's the beauty of talent ID. Is sometimes a 17-year-old can be outstanding because physically he's more developed than his peers at that age, and a 17-year-old who hasn't fulfilled that potential yet, athletic development, can pass them out. So it's not an exact science, but certainly the beauty of schools rugby. I was down in Stellenbosch at a coaching conference last November, and because I was Irish and a lot of the coaches were school coaches, they were saying to me, "Oh, Josh Neill is going to Ireland," or whatever. That's a year ago, or nearly a year ago, and they said he's one of the most outstanding schoolboys that they've seen. And like here in Ireland, we see the Schools Cup in February, March on streams or on TV, or we can go down to Virgin Media Park, or we can go to Donnybrook or the RDS. But a lot of the schoolboy games the friendlies are actually shown on Super Sport in South Africa. So it's not just the media or the Western Province or the Bulls Academy scouts who are
the general rugby public.
Yeah, they all know about these kids.
Yeah.
They know them, and they saw Cheslin Kobe when he played Craven Week. And so that's probably why it's even more interesting. He was someone that a lot of people who follow rugby were keeping an eye on, and were excited to see where he went to the academy, where he went to university, and what franchise he signed for. My understanding is, speaking to an agent last night, is that all the four franchises put their best case in front of him, but he had made his mind up that he wanted to get out of wanted to get to Ireland. And try the opportunity here. And again, it goes back into something I've spoken about before. I think for the other provinces to catch up with Leinster, and Leinster aren't like, they're not doing everything right. They're not European Cup winners, etc. But realistically, the best winning record over the last 3 or 4 years in terms of win percentages of the provinces, they need to be able to identify those really outstanding kids a little bit younger and make a play for them, and that's why, from Leinster's point of view, it's a great bit of business to get this kid who's Irish qualified, and looks to be exceptional. But the other provinces, it's probably a miss for them because they probably need him more. But Leinster have got it done. Is
there any chance Razzie Erasmus tries to give him a cap in
the
next few weeks? Even though he's only 17.
No, I don't think he'll cap him in the next few weeks. Razzie's
not even Razzie would do that.
No, he's scratching himself just to get South Africa back winning. But no, Razzie, of all people, Razzie would do it, but no, not yet. Not yet, no.
That's all we got time for this week on the RTÉ Rugby podcast. Plenty of games coming up, obviously, at the World Cup. Saturday, New Zealand against South Africa is live on RT2 and RTÉ Player at 1 p.m. And also on Saturday afternoon, Canada and Australia at 4 p.m. That's on the Player. Then Sunday, the big one, Ireland against France, 1 p.m. on RT2 and RTÉ Player. England taking on Scotland then at 4 o'clock. That one will be on RTÉ Player. Bernard, thanks a million for dropping by. I'm sure we'll have you in the studio hopefully, a lot more times over the course of this season. And I'm sure we'll have another podcast coming up after Ireland and France at the weekend as well, looking back on the game, instant reaction, tons more reaction and updates coming throughout the week on the site as well. And we will speak to you again soon.